In the deserts of Tikrit, long before the world knew the name Saddam Hussein, a young boy walked the dusty paths with a fire in his eyes. A fire shaped by poverty, violence, survival, and ambition. This is the story of how Saddam Hussein transformed from a struggling child into the most feared and powerful man in Iraq. This is episode 2. The Rise of a Young Leader. Saddam Hussein was born into a world of conflict. His father either died or disappeared before he was even born, leaving his mother to struggle with overwhelming grief, poverty, and loneliness. Saddam grew up in a harsh tribal environment, where strength meant survival. There were no luxuries, no privileges, only a constant battle with hunger and fear. But it was in that hardship that Saddam developed the qualities that would later define him: patience, endurance, silence, and the unwavering will to rise above his circumstances. People who knew him back then described him as quiet, serious, and intensely determined. Even as a child, Saddam carried a deep belief that he was destined for something greater. He saw his humble beginnings not as a life sentence, but as a starting point. At the age of 10, Saddam's life took its first major turn. He left the desolate plains of Tikrit to live with his uncle in Baghdad. This move was more than just a change of address. It was an entry into a completely new world. The capital city exposed him to politics, power, books, nationalist ideas, and the modern era. For the first time, Saddam saw immense wealth and influence up close. He watched how leaders could shape the destiny of nations, and how weakness could lead to their destruction. This environment ignited his ambition. It was here, in the bustling streets and political cafes of Baghdad, that Saddam first heard of a movement that would change his life forever: the Ba'ath Party. Under the guidance of his uncle Karalat Ulfa, a former army officer and a fierce Arab nationalist, Saddam's political mind began to form. He wasn't just going to school, he was being mentored in the art of power. He devoured books on Arab identity, leadership, military heroes, and anti-colonial resistance. He became fascinated with historical figures who ruled with an iron fist, leaders who were fearless and absolute. These ideas became the very foundation of Saddam's worldview. He became convinced that Iraq, a nation fractured by internal and external pressures, needed a strong hand. It needed a leader who could unite its people, defend its borders, and dominate its region. As a teenager, Saddam's path became clear. He officially joined the Ba'ath Party, a revolutionary movement that promoted a powerful blend of Arab unity, socialism, national strength, and a staunchly anti-Western stance. The party preached the need for strong leadership to restore Arab glory. Saddam, though young, immediately stood out. He wasn't a debater or a theorist. He was a man of action. While others talked, he did. He was willing to take risks that others shied away from, driven by a loyalty to the cause that bordered on fanaticism. His discipline and quiet intensity earned him respect among the party's more senior members. They saw in him a tool, a weapon they could use. Saddam's rise from the grassroots of the party had officially begun. Then came the moment that would catapult him from a low-level activist to a figure of notoriety. In 1959, at only 22 years old, Saddam was chosen for one of the most dangerous missions in Iraq's turbulent political history: the assassination of the Prime Minister, Abdul Karim Qasim. The Ba'ath Party saw Qasim as a threat to their ideology, a leader pulling Iraq away from the path of Pan-Arab nationalism. This high-stakes mission revealed Saddam's core personality: fearless, calculating, and absolutely loyal to the cause. He was ready to risk his life without a second thought. The assassination attempt was a chaotic failure. In a hail of bullets, Saddam was shot in the leg, but in a display of incredible grit, he managed to escape. Wounded but alive, he had proven his mettle. This single event transformed his image overnight. He was no longer just another young activist. He was a hero, a martyr for the cause who had survived. After the failed attack, Saddam fled Iraq, finding refuge in Egypt. This period of exile wasn't a time of defeat. It was a classroom for power. In Cairo, under the watchful eye of Gamal Abdel Nasser's regime, Saddam learned invaluable lessons. He observed how modern leaders control nations, how sophisticated intelligence agencies operate, and how propaganda can be wielded to shape public opinion. He studied the mechanics of one-party states, watching how dictators rise and, more importantly, how they fall. He was a patient student, absorbing everything, analyzing every move. This was his political education, and he was preparing for a much bigger role on a much bigger stage. His time in Egypt hardened him, making him more sophisticated in his understanding of control. When the Ba'ath Party finally seized power in a 1963 coup, Saddam returned to Iraq a changed man. He was no longer a junior operative, he was a respected veteran. He immediately began the slow, methodical work of building his own power base. He was a master networker, forging crucial tribal alliances, cultivating relationships within the military, establishing contacts in the intelligence world, and consolidating his political influence within the party. Saddam wasn't the loudest person in the room. He was often the most observant. He listened more than he spoke, watching who was loyal, who was ambitious, and who was a threat. By the late 1960s, while others held the titles, Saddam had become one of the most powerful figures pulling the strings behind the scenes. He wasn't the president yet, but he was already leading from the shadows. Saddam's true genius lay in understanding that real power doesn't come from titles, but from control. He was instrumental in establishing the Iraqi security and intelligence apparatus, the very heart of his future power. He operated on a simple, chilling belief: a leader must know everything. This vast network of spies and informants allowed him to monitor rivals, punish enemies with brutal efficiency, reward his loyalists, and, most critically, control the flow of information across the entire country. Nothing happened without him knowing. His power grew silently but rapidly, like a shadow stretching across the nation. He was building the foundations of a state where fear was the ultimate currency. By 1968, another Ba'athist coup solidified the party's rule, and Saddam's position became unassailable. He was no longer just a member of the party. He was the deputy to the president, the undisputed strongman. He had everything in place: political intelligence that gave him eyes and ears everywhere, military loyalty that ensured the guns were pointed in the right direction, tribal backing that secured the country's heartland, and a ruthless security machine that crushed any hint of dissent. The stage was set. The young boy from Tikrit was now on the precipice of total power. He had risen from poverty. He had survived bullets. He had learned from exile. He had built a political empire from the ground up. And soon, very soon, he would take the throne of Iraq, not as a king, but as a master of fear and control. Join us for episode 3, as Saddam Hussein completes his journey on the road to the presidency. Thanks for watching.